I never expected to inherit anything, let alone expose my sister's lies. But when the will was read, everything I thought I knew changed forever. Hi there, I'm Ava Blackwood, and this is the story of how I fought to reclaim my place in a family full of secrets, lies, and betrayals. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about taking back what was rightfully mine and silencing the voices that tried to control me for so long. If you're curious to know how I navigated through the storm and finally found my strength, make sure to stick around until the very end. And if you enjoy this journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support gives me the motivation to keep bringing more stories your way. Let's dive into it. It had been 2 weeks since my mother's funeral, and the void she left felt deeper every day. We were never a close family, but I had hoped that at least in her final days, there would be some kind of reconciliation. I had been the forgotten child for as long as I could remember, the one who never seemed to fit in with the rest of the family. My name, Ava Blackwood, was often spoken with a hint of discomfort by my sister, Marissa. The world seemed to revolve around her, perfectly poised, perfectly put together, and perfectly entitled. I sat in my small New York apartment, the city's hum outside my window doing little to ease the tension gnawing at me. The letter had come out of nowhere, just a stiff white envelope with my name elegantly typed on it. The embossed lettering looked almost royal, and I knew it was from my mother's lawyer. The lack of a phone call, no heads up, nothing. It was as if they were daring me to show up. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity, the weight of it almost suffocating. Callista, my mother's right-hand woman and my sister's self-proclaimed ally, had promised she'd keep me in the loop, but I hadn't heard from her since the funeral. Funny how easily people can forget you when there's nothing to gain. The letter didn't hold any comfort. It wasn't a note from my mother, not in the way I had hoped. It was a summons, a final request to attend the reading of the will. The lawyer had no idea what he was about to unveil to the family. I drove up to the family estate, the tires of my car crunching on the gravel like a metaphor for the tension that had built up over the years. Every turn of the wheels felt deliberate, heavy, like they were pressing forward through memories I had tried so hard to leave behind. As the imposing silhouette of the house came into view, the memories flooded back. Of summers spent feeling like an outsider, of Marissa being showered with attention, gifts, and affection, while I was always kept at arm's length, like an afterthought, a ghost in the shadows. I was always the background character in her story, never the protagonist. The large, old house loomed ahead of me, its stone facade and ivy-covered walls still as grand and unyielding as ever. There were parts of me that dreaded it, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. This house held too many ghosts, memories of my mother, of family gatherings where Marissa was always the center of attention, and I was the quiet one, the invisible one. As I walked through the front door, the housekeeper barely acknowledged me. She gave me a quick nod, but her eyes never quite met mine. She barely even bothered to smile. A simple gesture, perhaps, but it was enough to cut through me like a knife. There was a chill in the air that wasn't just from the temperature. It was the kind of chill that settled in your bones, the kind that says you're not wanted here. I could feel it in my skin, the icy reception. It wasn't just the atmosphere of the house. It was the energy that clung to everything like a thick fog that never quite lifted. The walls, the furniture, the air itself. It all whispered secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. I had come to dread this place. Every inch of it was steeped in silent judgments, old grievances, and buried resentment. I found Marissa standing by the window, her back straight, looking down at the estate as if it were all hers. The faintest smile played on her lips, one of those smiles that could cut through steel, designed to project control, to remind everyone in the room that she was in charge. She had that way about her. Always poised, always perfect. She was holding court, speaking with the lawyer as though the whole thing had already been settled. As if I weren't even here. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the desk with a rhythm that made my teeth clench. It was a sound I'd heard too many times in my life. An unmistakable sign of her confidence, her ability to dominate any situation, to make herself the center of attention. I could already hear her voice in my head, light and sugary, like she was trying to soften the edge of whatever cutting remark she was about to make. "Didn't know they were letting the uninvited show up?" she said, barely glancing at me as I walked in. The sting of her words hit me, but I didn't react. Couldn't. Marissa thrived on reactions. She always had. If you showed her weakness, if you flinched, she would exploit it. That's something I had learned the hard way. Over the years, I had come to understand her, to read her like a book. And in doing so, I had learned how to remain silent, how to stay composed. She hated that. She needed me to respond, to fight back, to give her something she could use to fuel her superiority. But today, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I didn't let her words rattle me. Instead, I stood there, absorbing the cold reception, the tension that hung in the room like a thick fog. I was here for one reason and one reason only, to find out what was in that will, to understand what my mother had left behind, and to figure out why, after all these years of being pushed aside, I was still being drawn back into this web of manipulation. The will reading was about to begin, and as I took my seat at the long table, I could feel something was off. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. There was an underlying hum in the air, a tension that I couldn't quite place, but I knew it was there. Marissa's icy demeanor, the lawyer's stiff formality. It was all part of the facade. I could see it now, the game they were playing, and I was being forced to play along. I noticed Marissa, ever so subtle, slip a folded piece of paper under the table to someone beside her. Uncle Rowan, who I hadn't seen in years, looked down at it quickly, but I caught the movement. It was a small act, barely noticeable, but it spoke volumes. The weight of it settled in my stomach like a stone. I knew right then that this wasn't going to be a simple reading of assets and names. No, this was something much bigger, something that had been set in motion long before I had stepped foot in this house. It wasn't just about the inheritance. This was a battle for something far more valuable, control. And I wasn't going to let Marissa have it, not this time. Uncle Rowan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes flicking between Marissa and me, trying to gauge the situation. He had always been the passive one, the one who never took sides. But today I could see that even he knew this was different. Marissa's hand lingered under the table, holding onto the paper like it was a secret she was trying to keep hidden. A secret that would change everything. I could feel her eyes on me, sharp and calculating, like a predator watching her prey. She knew I was onto her, but she wasn't going to back down. The silence grew heavier, and I felt my pulse quicken as the lawyer stepped forward, ready to begin. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to explode. The room, the house, the entire family, it was all about to come undone. And I had a front row seat. I clenched my hands together in my lap, keeping my breathing steady. I wasn't going to react to her games. Not today. Today, I would be the one in control. Today, I would be the one who took back what was rightfully mine. As the lawyer cleared his throat and began speaking, I could see Marissa shift slightly in her chair, her face a mask of composure, but her eyes betraying her. I had learned long ago that it was always in the eyes, and today her eyes spoke of fear, a fear that she hadn't anticipated. I was ready, and this time I wasn't going to let her win. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story, but before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. The lawyer, Lawrence Grant, stepped into the room and immediately the atmosphere changed. The air grew thick, heavy with a sense of anticipation as if everyone in the room had collectively held their breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. It wasn't just the tension from the moment, it was the weight of years of secrets, lies, and unspoken truths hanging in the air. There was a palpable shift in the room, like the world was tilting just slightly and we were all teetering on the edge of it. Marissa, ever the picture of composure, stood by the window, her back straight as a ruler, her eyes scanning the room. Her smile faltered ever so slightly as Lawrence entered. For a fraction of a second, there was something in her gaze, something that flickered and then disappeared. Fear? No, it wasn't fear. It was the realization, I could see it now, that this wasn't going to go the way she thought it would. The plan she had meticulously constructed, the perfect little world where she controlled everything, was about to be shattered. Shall we begin? Lawrence's voice was smooth, practiced, but there was a slight edge to it now. He had stepped into this room with all the poise of someone about to deliver a bombshell. He didn't need to say much more. The way he scanned the room, taking in the faces, pausing just enough for the tension to grow thicker, was enough to let everyone know this was no ordinary moment. It was as if he was preparing us for the storm that was coming. I watched, my heart beating faster as Lawrence slowly unfolded the will. The crinkling sound of the paper was almost deafening in the tense silence, echoing around the room like the sound of a ticking clock, each second inching us closer to the revelation. My breath caught in my throat as Lawrence began to read, his eyes scanning the paper carefully as if checking once again to make sure everything was in order before speaking the words aloud. Everything, including the estate, personal belongings, and residual income, is to be left to Ava Blackwood. The room froze. It wasn't just the shock of the words, it was the impact of the truth being laid bare. There was a sound, a glass shattering, before I even had time to process what was happening. It wasn't a loud crash, but it felt as though the sound could be heard for miles. A glass, Marissa's glass, falling to the floor, the clear liquid splashing out as if it were the last bit of control she had left. Marissa's face drained of color, her perfectly constructed mask of composure crumbling in an instant. Her hand shot up in disbelief, knocking over her glass as her jaw dropped, her mouth barely able to form words. What? Her voice barely reached a whisper, the shock evident in every syllable. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The truth had been spoken. The room, though still, felt as though it was spinning. I sat there, almost numb, taking in what I had just heard. This wasn't just a financial win for me, it wasn't about the money, the estate, or the property. It was a declaration of everything I had fought for, silently, for years. My worth, my voice, my presence. The years of feeling invisible, overlooked, like a shadow in the background, gone. This was the moment where everything had shifted. Lawrence didn't stop there. He continued reading, his voice steady, yet the weight of his words was undeniable. There was a clause added just before my mother's passing, a decision that had been made with the clarity of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, even in her final days. The estate is to be left to Ava Blackwood, but there are conditions. Ava must maintain the family home, live in it for at least a year. During this time, no changes to the property may be made. Marissa Blackwood is hereby barred from making any alterations to the house or its contents during this period. The room held its breath. For a moment, there was no sound. Even the air seemed to stop moving, as if time had momentarily frozen. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, a distant hum in the back of my mind, as if the world outside was shutting down to give this moment the attention it deserved. Marissa's world, the carefully constructed empire she had built on control and manipulation, was crumbling before her eyes. And I could see it in the shifting expression on her face. The facade of power, the cool exterior she always wore, was beginning to slip. I could feel the change, the cracks starting to appear beneath her flawless mask. She was trying to compose herself, but I could see the panic in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she tried to steady herself. It wasn't just disbelief, it was the realization that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. It was about protecting something that she had never thought was worth protecting. The truth had a way of doing that. It stripped away the layers of lies, the facade, and exposed everything for what it was. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. This wasn't just about an inheritance. It wasn't just about who got what. This was a battle for something far more important, my place in the world, my right to exist without being diminished, my ability to stand tall without having to apologize for it. I watched as Marissa's expression faltered further. The cracks deepened, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. She sat back in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line, trying to regain her composure. But I could see the panic creeping in. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words died on her lips. I could feel the weight of the moment settling around me. For the first time, I wasn't just another person in the background. I wasn't the invisible daughter, the one who always took the back seat. Today, I was the one standing at the forefront, and for the first time, I knew that the world was finally going to see me. Marissa's world had crumbled, but mine had just begun to take shape. And this was only the beginning. I stood there, holding the will in my hands. The words from my mother, written in her shaky yet determined handwriting, burned into my memory. She had known what Marissa had done, and she had taken steps to protect me, to protect her legacy. It wasn't just about the house or the money, it was about something far deeper, something that had been buried for years. For so long, I had watched from the shadows. Always the quiet one, the one who observed, the one who never quite fit into the perfect image Marissa had crafted. Growing up, I was the quiet observer in our family. I stayed in the background, letting my sister take the spotlight. Marissa had always been the golden child, the one who got the best grades, the one who was doted on, the one who made everything look effortless. I was the invisible one, the one they barely noticed. But things had changed. Things had been changing for a long time. Marissa tried to fight back. She called the will a fabrication, claimed our mother was confused in her final days. But the evidence was irrefutable. The witnesses, the signatures, the notary, everything lined up. And I had something more, a video recording of my mother speaking clearly about her intentions recorded just days before her passing. That video was my trump card, the one thing that would expose everything. The room was silent as the footage played. I watched the faces around me, saw the disbelief on their faces as my mother's voice filled the room, unwavering in its clarity. Her voice was frail, yes, but the words were strong. Every word was deliberate, every sentence an act of defiance against everything Marissa had tried to do. And as the video continued, I didn't need to say anything more. The truth was now in the open, and there was nothing Marissa could do to erase it. She froze, caught in her own web of deceit, while I stood tall, no longer the quiet one. There was something liberating about that moment. The silence of the room, the weight of the truth hanging in the air, and the look of utter defeat in Marissa's eyes, those were the things that would stay with me forever. For the first time in my life, I had reclaimed my place. Not just in the family, but in the world. I had spent years playing the quiet one, the one who hid in the background and let others dictate my life. But not anymore. The truth had spoken for itself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away. Marissa was still frozen, her face pale, her mouth slightly open as she tried to process the reality of what was happening. Her hands shook and her breath came in short gasps. It was as if the weight of everything she had worked for, the lies, the manipulation, the control, was crashing down around her. And she couldn't stop it. She had always thought she could control everything, but now she was the one losing control. I watched as her eyes flickered to the lawyer, to the others in the room, as if searching for someone to help her escape this reality. But there was no escape. I could see her thoughts racing. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is a mistake," she said. "Mom didn't know what she was doing. She was confused, Shia." But I didn't let her finish. I had heard enough of her lies. "No, Marissa, it's not a mistake. This was Mom's decision. She knew exactly what she was doing. And this was her choice." The room remained still, the tension thick enough to cut through. I felt the weight of my mother's legacy resting on my shoulders. It wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about something far deeper, the love and care that had been hidden beneath years of resentment and manipulation. My mother had made sure I was protected. She had seen what Marissa had done, and she had acted. She had put an end to it all. Marissa's face turned crimson, her lips pressed tightly together as she fought to hold back the wave of anger threatening to overtake her. But she couldn't hold it in. The facade she had so carefully built over the years was crumbling before her eyes. And she knew it. I stepped forward, still holding the will in my hands, as if it were the most powerful weapon in the room. "This is my inheritance," I said, my voice steady, my hands steady. "Not just the money, not just the house, but my place in this family. My right to exist. My right to be seen." There was a long pause. The room was silent, save for the faint sound of the clock ticking in the background. Time seemed to stretch on forever. And in that silence, I realized something. Silence had never been my weakness. It had been my strength all along. As I left the estate, the weight of everything lifted. I had stood up for myself, for my mother, and for the truth. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garden, and I realized that the darkness that had loomed over me for so long was finally beginning to lift. I was no longer hiding. I had taken my place. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. The road ahead was uncertain. There would be battles to fight, and there would be challenges to face. But I was ready. I had faced the truth, and now I would face whatever came next with strength and resolve. Marissa may have thought she had won all these years, but she had underestimated me. She had underestimated the power of silence, of standing still, of waiting for the right moment to strike. And in the end, that's what had won me the battle. I drove away from the estate, my hands gripping the steering wheel with newfound determination. The road stretched out before me, and for the first time, I felt like I could take control of my life. There was no looking back. The truth had set me free, and I would never be silenced again. So, what do you think about the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or any feedback you might have. Don't hesitate to drop a comment below. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to give it a like and hit that subscribe button so you can stay tuned for the next chapter. We've got more stories to share, and I'm excited to bring them to you. Thank you for sticking around until the end and for being part of this moment. Until next time, take care and keep embracing the truth.